Hey folks, welcome back to another video. Today we want to create a stochastic sequencer inside of the grid of Bitwig Studio. I promise it's very simple, it's very easy. Trust me, okay? So a stochastic sequencer is basically where you define for each step of the sequence the probability of a certain note to occur or a certain rhythm to occur, right? So we want to dial in probabilities for the pitch, we want to dial in probabilities for the rhythm and the velocity and maybe pressure, timbre and so on, and then send everything out as a note for us to use on maybe to record this as a sequence into a note clip, or maybe we want to use it on a VST or on a Bitwig device, okay? So in Bitwig, we want to open up here node grid on an empty project. So let's go to node grid. Because like I said, we want to use this on multiple instruments, different instruments, maybe VST devices, or record this stuff. So we delete here basically the input, the node input, and make sure here the node grid is on monophonic mode. Voice is mono, it's very important. And in here we want to use a pitches module. And this one here, we select all the notes we want to use in our sequencer. You can use here chromatic notes, so all the notes, or maybe you pre-select a certain scale. What I do here, just want to select more or less D sharp minor. So it depends on you. You can also change the step size. You don't need to use 8 steps. You can use as many steps as you want. Then we disable here the pre-chord, and we want to use a clock and drive basically here the step sequencer or this pitches module. And we use probabilities module. The most important part is that you disable here the pre-chord, and that you have the same step size. So this is 8 steps, and this is also 8 steps. Okay, and then we use here a sample and hold, and we connect these two. We use here a quantizer, so I can show you how it looks like. And now we increase here the speed of the clock to 32 Hertz as the maximum speed. And now we can dial in. We want to have here basically in our sequence the note of D sharp most of the times. You can see it selects now D sharp. And we want to have A sharp in there sometimes. Let's go here. Now you can see it switching here, flashing between D sharp and A sharp. And sometimes we want to also have here, let's say, F sharp in there. Only sometimes, or maybe most of the times, right? So it selects F sharp most of the times. But this is a signal you can't send out because it changes pitches pretty fast, right? So what we want to do is we want to use a sample and hold here and use a triggers module to update this pitch here, basically 16 in a 16 note grid. So this is now something you can send out as a pitch and as triggers, and you can use here a polymer or maybe some VST you want to use. Maybe a convolution reverb. Maybe delay 2. So now you can say, I want only to have D sharp in there, or maybe C sharp. C sharp most of the times. And it creates basically a sequence for you based on these probabilities. So this is the main idea behind this. And we flash this out now for all kinds of data and for all kinds of informations, not only for pitches. So we also want to have here octave shifts in there. So we use an octaver. We use here 0, and then we use a step module. So we can dial in some steps. We also want to have here minus octave, so octave down. So we use here bipolar signal. So let's say use a modulator out here, and we use a value, so we can test each value. Disable the pre-chord here, so we can select something. So the first position is basically no octave shift. And the second one is probably 1 octave higher, but we dial in here 2 or 3. Let's go for 3. So here we dial in just a tad. And this is selected here and this is modulated. When I hover over this, you can see down here in the bottom info bar, you can see there is octave shift 0, which is the current value, and then +1. This is the modulated value. So it's exactly what we want, +1. So we use Alt here, move on to the next one. This should be +2. Yes. And then the next one is all the way. This is +3. So 3 octaves higher. And then we do the same thing for down. So this is -1, hopefully. Yes. This is -2. Yes. And this is nothing yet. This is -3. Nice. Okay. So we have multiple octave shifts in there. Also at the end, you can leave this free or maybe make the step count lower to 8, but I leave it at 8 here. Okay. So now that we have this, we can remove the value here. We can drive this also with the clock. We want to use probably also a sample and hold here. And to use probabilities. But first I use a display here and say this is the notes probability, right? And then we have here octaves, and then we drive here basically this sample and hold. This is pitch. Okay, cool. So now we can define here basically what kind of octave shift we want to have. Sometimes we want to have 1 octave higher, sometimes we want to have 1 octave lower, and rarely maybe 2 octaves or 3 octaves. Or this is actually 2 octaves higher. This is 1 octave down. So it depends on how you structure this. Maybe you can structure this differently. Maybe 3 up and 3 down is way too much. But just to show you this. So basically at the moment we only select 2 notes here, C sharp and D sharp, but we have a lot of octave shifts in there. Maybe we want to have here A sharp. Okay, works quite well so far. Now we want to move on to, let's say, velocity. We do basically the same thing here. We move this up, say this is velocity. But here we don't need bipolar, we use unipolar and draw in some kind of ramp. So we have low velocity and high velocity. And then we select here this with this kind of thing here. So we can say we want to have low velocity all the time or high velocity all the time, right? Or in the middle, something in the middle here. And then draw kind of a line with this. And here I think we don't need a modulator. We can just go into the out here, velocity out. And we want to have also your sample and hold with the triggers. So we want to have basically for each node we trigger here, we want to have a right velocity setting. Oh, we have to go in this here. Okay, so now that we have this, we can also do this for, let's say, pressure. And also timbre. Makes a lot of difference to use multiple modulation values here. So high pressure, high or low pressure, high pressure, low timbre, high timbre. And we go with the pressure in, we have to expand this. Go with the pressure here in this one. With the timbre, we go into this one. We can also select gain and pen if you want to. Or you can do this if you want to. I just leave it here with these settings. Okay, so then we need also to expand here, of course, this to pressure and timbre. Pressure. So this goes into that. Timbre goes into the top one. Okay. So in the synth now you can use velocity, of course. We already select or use velocity here with the velocity sensitivity. And we can say pressure is maybe for the wavetable position, right? And then you can say I want to be with the wavetable all the time at zero index. And sometimes I want to select this position in the wavetable, right? And so on. You can also increase this here to maybe, I don't know, 64 steps if you want to. So you can dial in for each, or for 64 table positions here, the probability, if you want to. But I just choose 8, because I'm lazy. Also timbre, maybe timbre we can use here for the modulation amount, for the envelope modulation amount. And so this is basically how you paint in or you create sequences this way. The last thing we want to do is kind of the rhythm. At the moment everything triggers basically in 16 note steps, so you want to change the rhythm for each note. So we do this here pretty simply by using a merge. And then use multiple triggers. So we say we want to have maybe 2 notes. We want to have 4 notes. We want to have 8 notes, of course. We want to have 16 notes. Let's go to 16. And maybe 32. Just for quick rolls. And we want to leave something empty, so have to have no trigger at all to make a pause basically in the sequence. I think that's also important. Then we also drive this here with the clock signal, and we use a sample and hold here in between that for this for this whole thing. And we use, of course, here triggers. And we have here, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 positions, we go step count to 6. And we use this here for the sample and hold for the trigger. So now we can select, we want to have 2 notes all the time. And sometimes we want to have 4 triggers. And sometimes 8. Very rarely, maybe 16, and even more rarely 32 notes, and we have a lot of pause things. So now it selects these things here on the merge, and we want to have, I think, when we switch pretty drastically between these things. We want to slow this down with the sample and hold and use maybe 16 notes. And we want to have here the interpolation on nearest, so we don't have in-between things here. So now you can see it switches between these things in the 16-note grid. Also the 16-note grid is basically the highest for updating here everything in there. We also want to, instead of using 16 notes to trigger the notes, we use now the output of that. And we use that for sampling here the pitch and all the other things. Something like that. And basically the 16 note trigger is only there to change. This is basically the update rate of changing the rhythm, and the rhythm itself then is used to trigger the notes and trigger each value for the notes. So this is the idea behind it. So let's see how this sounds now. So we want to have 2 notes, pretty slow sequence, sometimes a pause. Let's select high velocity here. Maybe 4 notes. And maybe a different wavetable. Yeah. Sounds quite okay, I think. Okay, so now we can create sequences, and these kind of sequences are also kind of random. So what you want to have is basically you want to sample the sequence and repeat it in a way. So what you can do is you can first and foremost just record this to a different track. You can say and add this instrument track here. And then use here the output of the notes grid and just sample this. And then record the sequence and then use the sequence maybe for a different VST, or just drag it over here and disable the thing and just let it play. And everything is in here. I can see we have different velocity settings, we have different timbre settings, we have different pressure settings. So everything is saved basically in this note clip that we created with the note grid. But we can also create inside of the grid some kind of recording device, just to record everything. So I want to show you this here quickly. Or maybe we do this in a separate note grid to actually don't make this too complicated here. So I want to just save this. Say... See, yeah. Let's call this note rhythmic. Save this as a preset and then use a new note grid. And in this note grid, we want to record all the MIDI data or note data we receive from the first note grid into recorders. And for a moment here, I just disabled the polymer. So we need a recorder here. The recorder is sadly not that long. We can only record, I think, up to 3 or 4 seconds or so. But here with these recorders, we want to record, of course, the gates. We want to record the pitch informations. We want to record velocity. Also goes out. We also want to record pressure or timbre in this case here. And we want to record pressure. Okay, so now we have the recorders in place. We need to create some kind of control structure. So we want to use a trigger and call this record. Every time we want to press this, we want to start the recorder sequence, but the sequence needs to start exactly on the grid, on the beat grid. So here you can see I can press this anytime, right? Out of the grid. So we need to clock quantize this to a trigger module. Say one trigger at a time. So now it waits basically for the trigger to, it waits basically for the clock signal here to trigger actually what I pressed here on the button. So this is cool. Then we need a phase in. The phase in is basically gives us a ramp signal, and it's exactly 1 bar long. You can see this here on the device itself. Device phase length 1 bar. So this ramp signal is exactly 1 bar long and synchronized to the transport of Bitwig Studio. And we can say we want to create a trigger from that using logic here, comparator, and say the second input check is empty. And this means basically as long as the phase signal is not 0, give us a 1. So this is most of the time, as you can see here. So we get a 1 instead of the beginning. Here we get 0, right? Because here the ramp signal is 0, so we get a 0. But the rest of the time it's not 0, so we get a 1. So we can play around with this a bit. So let's see, we will have a record button. We want to press this button, then we want to start record exactly for one bar. So we need the latch for that. So start recording, right? And then this one here, when this is not 0, then trigger basically close down the recording. This looks like this. So I press a button, it waits basically until the bar starts, then it starts recording, and then at the end of the bar it stops recording. It switches back to 1. So this is exactly what we want for the recording trigger behavior. Bam. So now we can press record, it waits, then it triggers the recording. When the bar is ended, it ends the recording. So perfect for recording stuff. Probably want to have this here. Then we need a play button. So I use button here and call this play. And with this, we only want to, let's say, use the selector here and say, I want to have this this signal here, which is basically just this trigger behavior, right? It triggers all the time, but in the beginning here of a bar, it goes to 0. This is basically the playback behavior because we want to re-trigger the playback all the time. So we use this here as a playback. Maybe also use a different color. And we can switch the playback on with that. Maybe put this here. So now we can say playback. Oh, it's missing here. Connection. So you can see it re-triggers all the time and plays back everything that's in the buffer. So we can remove this. We can move this over here, make it a bit more compact. Oh, maybe move this over there. So now we can switch back on here to polymer. So it plays the same sequence, 1 bar sequence every time from the buffer. And we can re-record this from this device here at any time. So we press just record and it records a new sequence. Sadly, as I said, the recorder is very small, so you can only record up to 3 seconds or 4 seconds, I don't know exactly. So it's barely just 1 bar. Would be nice to have actually the possibility just record 4 bars and maybe also have some possibilities for slowing down the playback speed and you know, play from different positions and so on. This would be much better. I don't know, I'm asking for this for years now. We'll see if you get something like this in the future. So if you want to go back to your initial stochastic output, you just disable this. Or you maybe implement your another control structure to switch between the inputs and the outputs of the recorders here, but you can also just disable this and call it a day. Okay, so I put these 2 presets up on my Patreon, so you can download it if you want to. Everyone else can just rebuild this from this video, hopefully, and learn something from it. So a small little stochastic sequencer inside of the grid. It's not that super complicated, but I get it. It's pretty hard if you actually never did something in the grid. But yeah, I want to show you this in this video. And I think that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you liked the video. And see you in the next one. Bye.